As much as I love the most famous characters of G.I. Joe, whether we're talking about Storm Shadow and Firefly, or Zartan, or my beloved Lady J, or Dusty, or Barbecue, or Lowlight, or Alpine, or Bazooka, I won't collect a G.I. Joe figure line unless I can be guaranteed that I can put the original crew together, the original 13. Because even though a lot of my favorite characters are from the later waves, I think the best looking group together, the ones that started it all, are the OG 13. Those are the ones that I just keep gravitating towards as a display group. They really nailed that style right away with them in that first salvo of Hasbro product. So in 2007, when they relaunched the line with the 25th anniversary range of hyper-articulated, super detailed figures, we couldn't have anticipated that in the process of doing that, by the time they got to the 50th anniversary Toys R Us exclusive range, they were going to answer one of the long-standing mysteries for us, that it was no longer the original 13, but it had always been the original 14. G.I. Joe! G.I. Joe! Before we go into the details of the individual figures, I just want to point out some of the overall benefits and foibles of the 25th anniversary figure construction. I love the new detail. I love their attempts to bring new articulation into it. However, in terms of playability, as I've said in the past with some of these Hasbro designs for 3 3/4 inch hyper articulated or super articulated, it doesn't work all that well. You've got a lot of figures that can't hold their weapons because they make their hands this very shallow C grip so that weapons are always falling out. You've also got the problem where the articulation doesn't really do much except make the figure a kind of crunch puzzle. As a result, I find that what you get with the 25th anniversary body construction are figures that look like they can do a lot, but in reality, they can't do all that much. And thank God they all come with figure stands, because otherwise these guys wouldn't be able to stand up because their feet are tiny with the ankle pivots and their center of gravity is all thrown off from their weird parts construction. They look great when they're standing there, but in a very limited variety of positions. And once you try and go past that to do really dynamic things, it all kind of falls apart. One of the last things I want to mention in general about these figures is that for whatever reason, Hasbro did not know how to keep helmets on figures anymore, which is crucial when you're talking about the original G.I. Joe crew. Unfortunately, all of the helmets on these figures are kind of loosey-goosey, or they want to pop right up and then pop off. I'm not sure why, I'm not sure what the problem was at the design level, but all of these figures' helmets are sitting on their heads on a wing and a prayer. All right, let's get into the individual figures, and we'll start with their leader, Hawk. There were two major versions of the original Hawk released in the 25th anniversary range. One was very close to his original 1982 G.I. Joe look when he came with the mobile missile system, with his visored helmet and a few extra accessories. And the other one was more of a formal general style, where he had a silver eagle on his helmet, still with visor. He had a nice button-down dress uniform shirt, and he just looked sort of more put together, but not quite his original Hasbro self. So for my display, it's no surprise I opted to go with the Hawk that looks like he came from the original Hasbro line, just updated with the new modern articulation and detail. And this time he doesn't come with the mobile missile system, but he does come with one of the classic G.I. Joe rifles that originally came with Snow Job in the vintage figure range. Next up, we have Breaker. Now, Breaker is really faithful to the original 1982 G.I. Joe figure with just that enhanced detail and the new articulated build. However, this Breaker originally came with a bubblegum bubble effect, because in the original comics, Breaker was always chewing gum. I just thought it looked stupid on the action figure, and since the original Hasbro version didn't come with that, I left well enough alone and I never use it or display Breaker with it. It is nice that this version of Breaker also comes with a few weapons to defend himself with in case he gets in a jam, as the original 1982-1983 figure did not come with any weapons at all. Stalker was re-released a few ways in the 25th anniversary line, one of which came in a large Target-exclusive battle set with the Jump Jetpack. However, the version I went after for my display was the one that came on the dedicated card back, and there are variations to his camo color tone, so I chose one that I felt reflected the original 1982 figure the most. What's really strange about this version of Stalker from the original is that instead of the rifle that he came with in the original version, which also came with Duke, now they've packed him with a German MP40 from World War II. I'm not really sure why they decided to do that. A little weird, but overall he's a very good looking figure, and it's great that he also comes with a knife and his own sidearm as well. Grunt is one of the letdowns in this grouping from the 25th anniversary line. I won't sugarcoat that. For one, he comes with a far more primary green uniform compared to the more olive drab green that he should be colored in, so it makes him stand out and look cartoony rather than looking like true military. He also comes with an upgraded M16 that now has a grenade launcher on the bottom. And this also bugs me because when I see this rifle, I think of Leatherneck from the original line. And Grunt always seemed to be a holdover from Vietnam. I would prefer that he come with the original version of the M16 with the triangular foregrip, but they've given him this big chunky monkey weapon. So overall, I think Grunt was a little bit of a corner cut on this grouping. He's not the standout figure in the 25th anniversary original 13 run. For Steeler, I had two options. I could have gone with the more traditional olive drab green, but I do like to mix it up a little bit when I can with color tone shifts to give everybody a little bit of individuality. And in the case of the original 13, that can be difficult to do. So when they offered up Steeler in a tan color, even though the tank he came with in the figure set was green, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go after that Steeler instead of the original. The other selling point of the tan Steeler from the 25th anniversary line is the fact that he actually has a visor with his helmet, while the original 25th anniversary Steeler does not have the visor that he's supposed to come with. So that was another major selling point for me in trying to get the look of the original 13 run. For Grand Slam, it seems like Hasbro had the same idea they did back in 1983, where they changed the color of his pads from orange to silver to differentiate him from Flash, and I'm really glad they made that choice here. Unfortunately, the only way to get his Jump Jetpack accessory was to grab it from the alternate Stalker that came with the Target exclusive figure set. But once you pair them up, he looks great. When it comes to the 25th anniversary grouping of the original 13 Joes, Short Fuse is the most difficult to get correct. He's kind of a kit bash of other parts. He came in the same Target exclusive figure set as the tan Steeler and the Stalker with the Jump Jetpack. He has Doc's head repainted and he has Hawk's body. His head looks too small for the body and it's just kind of janky. What I did was I took the Short Fuse body, popped the head off, and took the head from Hawk's second version, and I put that on there. Now, I know that Short Fuse was often depicted with those glasses that were sometimes even depicted as mirrored lens sunglasses, but he didn't come with those in the original action figure, and so I don't visualize him that way in combat. This head looks more in proportion with this body, so it's a win-win. Then I drilled holes in the sides of Short Fuse's helmet so that I could swap the visor over so that his helmet didn't have that silver eagle on it, and I think this is a very respectable result for the display, especially when you consider that Hawk and Short Fuse, like so many others in the original 13 figure line, shared the same head anyway. Clutch is one of my favorites in the 25th anniversary original 13 grouping. He has a great vest overlay that gives him that original figure look because he was so unique when compared to the other figures in the 1982 run. The only drawback to Clutch is that his helmet doesn't want to stay on, which is a problem when he's a vehicle driver because you're constantly torquing him to get into that vamp, and yet his helmet is constantly popping off. It's a shame because otherwise this figure is choice. Zap is another one of the best looking figures out of the 25th anniversary original 13 range. Once again, his helmet doesn't want to stay on, but he has a great bazooka accessory that he can now hold without you worrying about his thumb breaking off, and he has removable rockets out of his backpack. He is a great looking figure. They've even now given him his mustache, and his uniform even retains that olive drab tone that was part of his action figure to differentiate it from his comrades. Zap is truly one of the coolest looking original 13 figures from the 25th anniversary run. And now we get to my nostalgic favorite, Flash. Now, if you were to ask me point blank who my favorite G.I. Joe character is, I would probably say Lady J. But Flash was one of my first Joes and one of the ones that I'm continually fascinated by. And this depiction of him is great. The 25th anniversary line really did him justice. The visored helmet, the backpack with the cable that connects it to the laser cannon, now all in a uniform silver color. Everything about this figure just screams vintage G.I. Joe. They even made sure that his boots still had those gaiters on the bottom. He looks great. Overall, Rock and Roll looks really good in this 25th anniversary style. He has the separate bandoliers now instead of them being molded to his chest, which really gives an added layer of realism. My only complaint with Rock and Roll is that it's now difficult for him to hold his MG42, and the bipod looks cartoonishly big. Overall, though, he is a great-looking addition in the 25th anniversary original 13 line, and I don't really have major complaints. Good Lord! How am I supposed to compete with Jeremiah Johnson over here? Now we come to one of the biggest letdowns in the 25th anniversary line in total, and especially when you consider the original 13 run, and that is Scarlet. She was one of the first figures they brought out in 2007, and they were still trying to work out the kinks and figure out how they wanted to do these figures. And when it came to the females, they really gave her a handicap. She's barely posable. The original vintage figure is far more posable, movable, articulated, whatever you want to call it. She looks decent in a few poses. She's not a complete disaster when it comes to display. She finally has her ponytail. She looks far more feminine than the original sculpt. All of these are pluses. But because she's not very posable at all, you really only get her kind of standing or maybe standing slightly at the ready, and her crossbow likes to fall apart because it's in two pieces. So the bow and string are constantly falling off the weapon when you're trying to get it posed. This is one of those figures where you get it in a position where it's a compromise, but it doesn't totally suck, and then you leave it there and walk away. Snake Eyes in his original Commando version was one of the first 25th anniversary figures. I personally don't mind his footwear changing to laced boots from those weird gaitered boots that he had in the original figure line. That doesn't bother me at all. And because there were so many different variations of the weapons in the 25th anniversary line, I was able to find him a proper Uzi that didn't have that extended buttstock. So now he looks like the original OG Snake Eyes. Finally, we need to talk about the 14th member of the original 13, and that is Jody Shooter Craig. For those of you who are scratching your heads going, who's Shooter? In the original G.I. Joe comic #1, there was a mysterious panel where they were picking their team, kind of like they did in Mask and other shows like that in the 80s. It was a trope. We're going to pick the team for this mission, and they picked the original 13. But somebody's hand was covering up a 14th member called Shooter, and the face was completely obscured in shadow. Nobody knew who Shooter was, and they never answered the question. Shooter never came back into the mythology. But years and years later, they finally decided, we need to figure out who Shooter is. And they defined her as Jody Shooter Craig, the G.I. Joe's original 13 team sniper. I love the fact that they didn't retcon another character to become Jodie Craig, because G.I. Joe was always organically diverse in the 1980s compared to other lines, so there's no reason to do that, and that they also answered a mystery for us at the same time. Because of that, not only do I completely accept this character, I love the fact that they filled in a missing piece. She looks great, and she's also in a role that the G.I. Joe team needed and didn't have. You know, they had Breaker, their communications officer. They had their mortar guy. They had their artillery dude. They had their commando. They had their laser rifle trooper. They had their heavy machine gunner. They had their driver. They had their bazooka soldier. They didn't have a sniper. So it was really smart of them to incorporate this character in this way. It just makes sense. The one drawback to this figure, and it is a massive one, is that Hasbro was so ambitious with her accessories, they actually made the accessories infuriating to work with. They give her a full sniper rifle case, and the rifle breaks down into its component parts to be stored in the case, which seems awesome on its face, but when you get a case like the one that came out of the bubble that I got my Jodie Craig from, it doesn't close properly. It actually stays open on one corner, which means the parts aren't going to stay inside anyway. On top of that, the parts always like to keep popping off the rifle when you're trying to get the rifle in her hands. So you're then tempted to glue the rifle together, but then you remind yourself, no, I can't glue the rifle together, because if I glue the rifle together, then the parts can't be disassembled and go back in the case. But wait, that doesn't matter anyway because my case doesn't close properly. I might as well just display her with her pistol, which has a separate removable silencer, which is really awesome. But then, of course, I won't be able to display her with her sniper rifle, which is her role in the G.I. Joe team, so this is pointless. Oh, and on top of that, the sniper rifle is so big, she can barely hold it because of the limited articulation of the 25th anniversary figures, even though they have tons of articulation, but it's never useful articulation. So most of the time you have to resort to just displaying Jodie standing there, holding her rifle upright, which is kind of a letdown. All in all, I think the 25th anniversary G.I. Joe line was a really great era to collect G.I. Joe. I do think that these were more aimed at adult display, even though they were mass marketed, which is nice. They were available to everyone, and I know that there were some parents who had kids who really got into them, and that's how they got interested in G.I. Joe, which is awesome. However, the figures themselves could be very fragile. They loosened up very quickly, and accessories were easily lost, and they just weren't the most fun figures to pose and play with if you're asking somebody who goes all the way back to 1982. And that's not nostalgia goggles, it's more about, do they work well with vehicles? Are they easy to get in and out? Are their guns popping apart like Shooter's rifle? A lot of those kind of things were going on in the pursuit of more detail to appeal to the adult collector. That being said, I am very, very glad that I completed this grouping and that I have them for future display in the studio. They look amazing, they're a nice new spin on G.I. Joe, and they're still that original scale, which I really appreciate. This is one I have no buyer's remorse on. The journey was fun, and once I got the whole thing completed, I was like, that was worth it. So thanks for watching this, and I'll see you on the next video. If you want to see more videos about G.I. Joe, you can watch our introduction of the original 13 way back in the day here. And if you just want to see more G.I. Joe content, you can watch our Tanks for Nothing special here. And now I'm gonna go put these guys back into storage temporarily until I can make room for them in the studio.